Hello everyone, and thank you for taking a look at our video. We will be presenting Germany and the Third Reich. Our group consists of Kyle, myself, Stephanie, and John.
The who, the what, and the why. Germany going into World War II had a lot of grievances from World War I because of the Treaty of Versailles. Due to being on the losing end of World War I, the treaty required them to pay back an obscene amount of money and hand over large amounts of land to neighboring nations. This caused a group of people, more specifically one individual, who would seek to return Germany to its former glory. This group of people became known as Nazis, and they were spearheaded by Adolf Hitler. By the time they entered World War II, Germany was eager to reclaim territory previously lost, regardless of what warnings the League of Nations gave them. The Nazis would continue to be the antithesis to America and its democracy by representing totalitarian government in World War II. Key members of the Nazi Party. The Führer, otherwise known as leader, was Adolf Hitler. Adolf essentially created the Nazi Party to overpower the current government at the time and establish himself as Germany's leader. Hitler was very patriotic. Although he was not technically German, he was Austrian. His passion for Germany led him to forcibly take back land previously lost, which started a domino effect, which eventually caused World War II. Heinrich Himmler was the second most powerful man in the Third Reich. Himmler was responsible for a lot of the Nazi Party's growth throughout its reign. He also became the commander of all German police units outside Prussia. This led him to create the first concentration camp. Himmler was extremely devoted to Hitler until the later months of the war, where he was eventually kicked out of the Third Reich for insubordination and was captured by the Allied powers. Heinrich committed suicide by poison after being captured. Joseph G. was the Minister of Propaganda in the Third Reich. He is responsible for masquerading the Nazi Party in a positive light to the German people. Goebbels was a gifted speaker and used that to spread propaganda throughout Germany intensively. Joseph controlled all forms of propaganda for the Nazi Party and eventually became the Chancellor of the Reich for one day. He then committed suicide after poisoning all of his children and his wife.
Before, Germany had immense dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles. Because of Adolf Hitler's rule, German folks stood for a revolution in Germany. They stood on the grounds that they were the more superior or master race, and that by driving away communists and Jewish people, they could fix their issues. To achieve this, they conquered Poland, allied themselves with Japan and Italy in 1940, declared war on the United States 1 year after, and even mistreated and killed off innocent Jewish people.
Impacts. In World War II, Germany brought immeasurable suffering and destruction to the whole of Europe. An estimated 60 million people were killed in the conflict, of whom around 5 million were Germans. Two-thirds of the dead were civilians, among them 6 million Jews. At the end of the Nazi regime, Germany was almost totally destroyed. Some 12 million Germans were refugees, mostly from regions in the east, that were now in Soviet hands and looking for a new home. The responsibility for World War II and the national sentiment of guilt shaped the role of Germany's politics and citizens in Europe for decades. Now we will talk about how they were viewed by other groups. Germany as a whole was seen as an enemy by most groups outside the Axis powers. The ideas of communism and fascism were not popular or accepted by the primarily democratic Allied powers. The treatment of prisoners of war by Germany was seen as some of the most horrific events of the entire era. Overall, this group was not looked upon favorably by the other groups. One would even say that it was probably the least favorable looking group out of everybody. And this definitely did not improve after the war. Moving on, we'll talk about the summary of actions events that Germany particularly was involved in throughout this time period. We'll start off in January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor at the time, and with the Nazi Party coming to regime, he in effect became a dictator over Germany. Moving forward, after some more political events, Germans, like we talked about before, were very sore about the previous war and did not agree with the Treaty of Versailles. And the World War II began September 1st, 1939, as Germany invaded Poland. Moving along throughout the events of the war, many casualties happened, civilian, military. Primarily, what is talked about a lot is what the Germans had done to the Jews. But by May 7th, 1945, Germany finally surrendered to the Allies after the war. And here we have our bibliography. With that, though, this does bring conclusion to our video, and wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to watch, and enjoy the rest of your semester.